Good evening from London and good evening from the British Group for the Study of the Juche idea and KFA, and of course the SONGUN007 channel. I hope everyone can hear me clearly. Thank everyone for joining. It's good to see people on the live stream already. So tonight I've got quite a few things to talk about. Originally, when I planned this live stream, I thought, oh, there's not really a lot I can say. But since then, quite a few things have been happening, and I will be talking about them first before going on to the subjects that I've said that I will be speaking about. And of course, as the former British Prime Minister Harold Wilson, who was the Prime Minister when I grew up, once said, "A week in politics is a long time," and indeed it is. My original topics got overtaken by all sorts of different events. And we've had the protests that have been rocking the US, which have caused Trump to deploy the National Guard and Marines to deal with these protests. And can you imagine if the DPRK put the army on the streets and enforced curfews, what an outcry there would be from the liberals and the so-called human rights defenders. And by the way, I just published an excellent article in Cover Action magazine, which exposes the so-called North Korea human rights lobby as what they are, puppets of imperialism who were being financed by the US deep state. And of course, have got into a bit of a pickle because Trump didn't want to fund them anymore. But that's another issue. So we've had the protests in the United States. We've also had rioting in Britain and in Ireland. In the 6 northeastern counties of Northern Ireland, which of course are under British rule, not Irish rule, loyalists have staged racist riots, have damaged a lot of property and have attacked the police. And in Salford, in the UK, in Britain, there was rioting on Wednesday. And of course, riots never happen in people's career because you've got single-hearted unity. You've got the socialist ownership of the means of production, distribution and exchange, and you've got absolutely no reason for people to become angry and to go out onto the street and vent their anger, which is happening all over the capitalist world. KCNA carried a short report yesterday on the US protests, and I will quote from it. While the protest that began on the 6th in Los Angeles against the current US administration's discriminatory immigration policy continues, protest marches were held in Chicago and other cities on the 10th. The protesters said that the authorities' arrests were causing a heartbreaking tragedy of young children being separated from their parents and demanded the abolition of the unjust immigration policy. However, the administration said it would increase the number of attacks on migrants who were protesting, doubling the number of National Guard troops sent to Los Angeles and mobilizing an additional 700 active duty US Marine Corps soldiers to suppress the protests. On the 9th alone, more than 100 protesters were arrested by the police. And that's the end of the KCNA report that was made in Korean language. You won't find it in the English language, about the events in the US. And also on the subject of the US, it's been reported. Now, I haven't actually seen any confirmation about this from the DPRK, but it's been reported that allegedly the DPRK refused to accept a letter from Trump to respected Marshal Kim Jong-un. It's difficult to know the accuracy of these reports because they've come from very dodgy sources like the CIA front organization NK News. However, taking all things into consideration, there is no reason to doubt such reports, as I've seen no statement from the DPRK that they plan to immediately enter into talks with the US. And indeed, a statement, an article by a DPRK analyst of international affairs said that the DPRK basically did not care whether DPRK citizens would be admitted to the US. So, assuming that the report is true, it shows that the DPRK is sticking to its guns and rejecting the fake peace offers of Trump. People's Korea has Juche and self-reliance. It does not need the US and its fake offers of aid. As President Kim Il-sung once said, "It is not true we cannot live without aid. We can not only live as well as we wish, even without aid, but also build socialism splendidly and must certainly do so." End quotation. Some fake and fraudulent so-called career experts, like the NK News gang aforementioned, are theorizing and speculating about what the apparent rejection of talks with the US means and what is going to happen in the future. They are basically indulging in crystal ball gazing. However, all they need to do is to study the decisions of the 8th Congress of the Workers' Party of Korea, the various plenary meetings that have been held since 2020, as well as the speeches of respected Marshal Kim Jong-un, which will tell them that the DPRK is unlikely to engage in talks with the US, although this cannot be completely ruled out. And as they say never in politics. The DPRK does what it says on the tin. It is an anti-imperialist state. Hopefully, in a few weeks, we will see lots of anti-imperialist posters for the month of solidarity in the DPRK. Hands up who noticed that among the pictures of the Korean Children's Union visiting Pyongyang, that they were actually looking at the germ bombs that were dropped by the US Air Force during the Fatherland Liberation War, and also at the reconstruction of an American missionary assaulting a Korean boy for picking an apple up. This was a very famous incident in Korea where an American missionary caught a Korean child and branded him using hydrochloric acid. So, on to the actual subjects that I put that I was going to discuss. There is a line in a song which goes, "The more things change, the more they stay the same." And this is indeed very true of South Korea. The mainstream media are hyping up the elections that took place on the 3rd of June. The new president that's in power is simply nothing but a changing of the puppet guard. One puppet has been replaced by another. One KFA UK member rightly described the new ruler as a slightly watered down fascist. The new regime in the Republic of Korea will wear a liberal mask, in contrast to the old regime, which wore a conservative or fascist mask. But in essence, both are the same. Both are against the DPRK and want the socialist system in the DPRK overthrown. Both are friends of big business, the chaebols, and both support the presence of US troops and bases in South Korea. And of course, there were several periods of so-called liberal rule in South Korea before, from 1998 to 2008, and from 2017 to 2022. And during those periods, the liberal authorities had the opportunity to call for the withdrawal of US troops and bases. In fact, they could have ordered it, but they did not do so. The election does not change the nature of the fascist state in the Republic of Korea. Pro-DPRK and leftist activities are banned under the national security law, and in the past, communist leaders and activists such as Kim Jong-tae were executed. As respected Marshal Kim Jong-un said, South Korea at present is nothing but a hemiplegic malformation and colonial subordinate state whose politics are completely out of order. Whole society tainted by Yankee culture and defense and security totally dependent on the US. End of quotation. So, it is really no change in South Korea. Of course, some people will point out there's been some measures taken by the South Korean regime, such as turning off loud speakers, but that is actually a very minimalistic step. And we need to wait and see what else they do. Of course, the political system of the DPRK is in complete contrast to the system in South Korea and in the US and Britain. The DPRK political system is a socialist system based on the socialist ownership of the means, production, distribution, and exchange. As for democracy, respected Marshal Kim Jong-un is the elected head of state. and was elected as General Secretary of the Workers' Party of Korea several times. Under a monarchy, the head of state is not elected. Article 101 of the DPRK Socialist Constitution states, and I quote, "The chairman of the State Affairs Commission of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea is elected at the Supreme People's Assembly." And Article 102 says, "The term of office of the chairman of the State Affairs Commission of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea is the same as that of the Supreme People's Assembly." This is really very different to the role of the monarch, such as King Charles in Britain. And also, Marshal Kim Jong-un is actually accountable to the Supreme People's Assembly. This again is a complete opposite to Britain, where in fact Parliament is actually accountable to the King, and the King has the legal power to dismiss Parliament. Some people may not believe this, but it's true, and in fact it was last used in 1830. And I think if Mr. Corbyn had won the election in 2019, I would imagine that he would have been denied permission by the Queen to form a government. In the DPRK, people exercise power through the Supreme People's Assembly and People's Committees at all levels. In the DPRK, governments are elected with 100% support, and this contrasts to the capitalist countries such as the UK, where the governments are actually elected by a minority of the electorate, sometimes only with 20 or 30% of the electorate supporting them. Bourgeois democracy is simply based on money. Whichever party has the most money wins the elections. All the main parties represent the interests of monopoly capitalism and capitalist rulers, even if they put the social democratic label on them. Alejandro Caldebenos, KFA president, wrote in his book Korea the Songun Citadel that in the DPRK you will not find one ballot tainted with money. Indeed, bourgeois democracy has become so corrupt. Not only does money determine the outcome, but members of parliament, particularly in the UK, have their snouts in the trough of parliamentary expenses and seek to make the maximum amount of money through their office. In the DPRK, deputies to the People's Assemblies work hard for the people, and they do not receive an additional salary for their for being a member of the Supreme People's Assembly. They will still receive the salary from their workplace. They will not gain anything by not gain anything materially by being a member of the Supreme People's Assembly. The DPRK is a socialist country. It has not yet reached a higher stage of socialism, which is communism, under which each will contribute according to their ability and receive according to their needs. Probably the DPRK will reach communism before other socialist countries. In the DPRK, there are the buds of communist society, such as free housing and low-cost food, which is virtually free. So, on to the last subject, the actual of food production in the DPRK. 2024 was a very good year for DPRK agriculture, in which the policies laid down by respected Marshal Kim Jong-un and the Workers' Party of Korea proved successful. Back in 2023, at the 9th plenary meeting of the 8th Central Committee of the Workers' Party of Korea, Marshal Kim Jong-un had advanced detailed tasks related to the development of agriculture, including the issue of powerfully pushing ahead with the mechanization of agriculture and perfecting the irrigation system. And he actually visited the farm machine exhibition in order to promote the mechanization of agriculture. At the 10th session of the 14th Supreme People's Assembly that was held on January 15th, Comrade Kim Jong-un called for making this year, 2025, a year of rich harvest again, and took measures to make sure that adequate materials were supplied. So last year, the DPRK achieved a bumper harvest, as it did in 2023, despite the unfavourable weather conditions. And I should also remark that 2024 was the 60th anniversary of President Kim Il-sung's work, the thesis on the socialist rural question in our country, which was originally presented to a plenary meeting of the Workers' Party of Korea on the 25th of February 1964. And basically, three main principles were advanced that should be adhered to in solving the rural question under socialism. To quote, first, the technological, cultural, and ideological revolutions should be thoroughly carried out in the rural areas. Second, the working class leadership of the peasantry, assistance of industry to agriculture, and the support of the towns to the countryside should be strengthened in every way. Third, the guidance and management of agriculture should be continually brought closer to the advanced level of enterprise management of industry. The bonds between all people property and cooperative property should be strengthened, and cooperative property should be brought steadily closer to the property of the whole people. End of quotation. These were very revolutionary policies. They were in complete contrast to the revisionist countries, where the ties between all people property and cooperative property were deliberately weakened, and the guidance of the state in agriculture was neglected. These three basic principles were buttressed by a program of investment and construction in rural areas and the improvement of people's living standards. The idea of constructing houses for the farmers at state expense was put forward, and the agricultural tax in kind was to be abolished. These were unprecedented measures. Thus, the socialist countryside of the DPRK became a paradise without taxation, exploitation, and oppression. Many great achievements were made in socialist agriculture under the leadership of President Kim Il-sung. In 1984, grain production was 5.3 times that of 1946 per hectare. Yields reached 7.2 tons for rice, 6.3 tons for maize. And the DPRK actually became a grain exporting nation. It was actually exporting grain in the 1970s. So, to conclude on this subject, final victory is in store for the socialist agriculture of People's Korea, advancing under the banner of the Juche idea and self-reliance. And before we come on to take a few questions, I'll just make a few announcements. On Monday, we've got the fourth reading session from the book Understanding Korea, Volume 9, Human Rights. Next weekend, the weekend of the longest day, is going to be a very busy weekend for KFA UK. We're going to picket the Yankee Imperialist Embassy on the 20th of June at 6 p.m. We hope as many of you as possible, if you're in London or near London, will be able to join the event. Then we're actually going to join the Stop the War March on the 21st, and we're going to have a live stream of KFA UK and KFA UK West of England later in the day, and we're going to have a barbecue as well. And also I should mention that I'm traveling up to Scotland, where we will have our first meeting in Scotland since 2019. I'm going to be addressing a meeting at Glasgow. There will be full details on KFA UK social media of the meeting. So I hope to see Scottish members and supporters on the 5th of July. So anyway, I will stop talking because I've been speaking for nearly half an hour, and just say hello to all those people who've just joined and put hello. Hello, George. Hello to Neko, and hello to Latin American 1000, and hello to Gregor McIntosh. And I totally agree, Iran has the right to defend itself, and I think it's a very foolish move of the Israelis to have attacked Iran. And you know, I think we see the dangers of the conflict escalating and even becoming a third world war. Anyway, I will take questions and comments now from everyone. I should just have a quick drink of water while I wait for people to bang away with comments or questions. No, maybe. Okay, first question. Right. Well, basically, President Kim Il-sung put forward the policy of abolishing the agricultural tax in kind, which had existed in the DPRK. This was for farmers, and this was abolished in the period 1964 to 1966. After that, the only forms of taxation that remained were local authority tax, which sounds a bit like council tax in the UK, and I'm sure Latin American 1000 would probably like to say a few words about uh, council tax in the UK, and also income tax, and both of those were abolished in March 1974. So DPRK has been a tax-free state for 51 years. Yes, I totally agree, George. The attack on it has proved the correctness of the DPRK developing the nuclear deterrent, and indeed also the events in Libya, where Colonel Gaddafi foolishly gave up the Iranian nuclear program. Sorry, not Iranian nuclear program, the Libyan nuclear program, gave up the Libyan nuclear program before it even got off the ground, when it was in its infancy. He actually had it dismantled, and the parts actually shipped to the US. Totally crazy thing. And of course, he paid for that very dearly, because the imperialists started a counter-revolution in Libya, and his government was not only overthrown, but he was killed in a most terrible and horrendous manner. And of course, you had the Iraq War, and you also had Yugoslavia, and all these have proved the correctness and justness of the DPRK developing nuclear weapons, and indeed also of having an uncompromising stand towards imperialism. And it is a fact, yes, the DPRK did enter into negotiations with the US, accepted the so-called olive branch that was being held out by Trump, though I always think that it was a question. He had an olive branch in one hand and a dagger behind his back, ready to stab the DPRK with. But what is most significant is that the DPRK did not dismantle a single nuclear weapon or dismantle a single intercontinental ballistic missile, nor did it, as was being suggested at the time, open a branch of McDonald's or KFC or join the IMF. These things were said in 2018 by the likes of the NK News Gang, and they proved to be totally untrue. Yes, they're quite correct, Latin American. The council tax is state-sponsored robbery of the working class and of low-income people. It's another means of exploitation by the capitalist state. Whereas in the DPRK, people benefit from the people first policies. I'm defender of the DPRK. I know that fascist parties have never had a high amount of support. Well, I'm not sure the context of that remark, but even a small amount of support can make fascist parties very dangerous because they take their politics onto the street. That is correct. The DPRK in Iran established close relations after the revolution in 1979. Yes, I agree that Iran is being targeted because it is the only remaining anti-imperialist state in the Middle East, because Syria has gone, Ba'athist Iraq went a long time ago, and the old People's Democratic Republic of Yemen, or South Yemen, also disappeared a very long time ago. In fact, about 35 years ago. So yeah, the Iran is the target. Well, while I wait for a few more questions or remarks, might as well talk about some of the anti-DPRK stories in the media. And of course, I think the smartphone story was one that attracted a lot of attention. And again, there was a lot of false accusations against the DPRK by the British Brainwashing Corporation, or the Bourgeois Baloney Corporation, or Bourgeois Broadcasting Corporation. I think we can we can find all sorts of different names for the BBC. Maybe one day we can have a KFA UK prize competition where people can win a enamelled DPRK badge or gift voucher to think of a name for the BBC. But anyway, there was this story circulated, the BBC had somehow got a smart DPRK iPhone or smartphone that had been, shock horror, smuggled out of the DPRK. Well, this is rubbish for starters, because if you go to the DPRK, you will see them phones on sale in the shops. It's not something that's sort of sold under the counter or secretly and people smuggling them out. I mean, that's rubbish. And in fact, it got revealed that the phone had actually been supplied to the British Brainwashing Corporation by the Daily NK in South Korea, a very notorious far-right website in South Korea that was being funded by the so-called US National Endowment for Democracy, a US state body. Don't pretend it wasn't. And that they got it from there, which shows that the BBC is very much in cahoots with South Korea, with the South Korean puppets, and with the far right in South Korea. And one of the things that the BBC thought was shocking, that if you put in the word oppa into the phone's dictionary, it says this word can only be used for a sibling, which is correct. It means brother. But because South Korea, being totally degenerate and debased, also has been using the word to mean a boyfriend. And of course, this is very dodgy because it implies incest. And apparently, I was told by someone who lived in South Korea is an expert on South Korea, that in fact the term had actually really come from the sex industry in South Korea. And I think the DPRK is 100% and 1,000% right to reject so-called South Korean K-pop culture, because it's just totally degenerate, and it's a copy of US and Japanese culture. And People's Korea is totally correct to block the ideological and cultural infiltration of US imperialism and world imperialism, and to block the psychological warfare of the US against it, which is aimed at overthrowing the socialist system in the DPRK. And in fact, the corrupt culture and ideology of the imperialists is like an advance guard, a scouting party for the colour revolution. And we all know what happened to the Soviet Union when it was heavily infiltrated by Western imperialist culture. Anyway, now we're getting some questions. Good. Yes, unfortunately, Ba'athist Iraq, which did have very close relations with the DPRK. The DPRK supported the Iraqi Ba'athist revolution. Yeah, but yes, the Ba'athist government in Iraq broke relations with the DPRK, but there's several different versions of this. It is generally thought that this was because of the DPRK's close ties with Tehran, as Latin American said. There was also some story about a football match as well, but that sounds like tabloid nonsense. But you know, we've seen several cases where different countries have acted against the DPRK for very localized reasons, like Mauritania, which had also been a close ally of the DPRK, didn't like the stance the DPRK took on West Sahara and Polisario. But Mauritania got over it and later re-established relations with the DPRK. And in fact, I believe in the 90s, there were moves by Ba'athist Iraq to re-establish relations with the DPRK, and Saddam Hussein actually sent a message to the DPRK on the occasion of the passing away of the great leader, President Kim Il-sung. What do the portraits of the leaders represent to the people in the DPRK? Well, that's a very good question, a relevant question. In the DPRK, the leaders, the great leaders, are not individuals, but they are a centre of unity. They are what society unites around and what holds society together and gels society together. So they're not simply individuals, and there is not a so-called cult of personality, which is a bourgeois and revisionist construct. Anyway, during one of my first visits to the DPRK, one of my guides explained to me what the portrait badge meant to him and why he wore the portrait badge with President Kim Il-sung. And it was very simple. He said, without President Kim Il-sung, there would be no Korea. And that's true. Korea would still be a colony of Japan. It would be shown as a province of Japan. And I can remember seeing a map in an old encyclopedia in my mother's house, which was from the 1930s, and Korea was not shown as an independent country, but as part of Japan. That was President Kim Il-sung's great achievement, one of many great achievements. In fact, to give the Korean people independence. And another one, of course, was building the socialist system in the DPRK. Latin American 1000. I noticed that sexual culture everywhere is online in the West. The DPRK people live wholesome and productive lives. That is very true. DPRK is a very wholesome and clean society. It's safe for women to go out at night in the DPRK, and women can actually walk down the street in the DPRK without being viewed as sexual objects and without being catcalled by men. That is a fact. Yeah, I totally agree with Latin American 1000 here. Choreo tours act as a middle class front for smuggling bourgeois ideology and culture into the DPRK, as most working class people cannot afford to travel there. And you're absolutely right. That is very true. You've hit the nail on the head. We've got many KFA members who would love to travel to the DPRK, who would uh, like nothing better to travel to the DPRK, but just cannot afford the very high cost of going there, which can also involve getting Chinese visas as well. But yes, there are obviously people with bad intentions that enter the DPRK through Choreo tours and through a number of tour companies. But overall, it is very much it is a business organization. It's about making money, but then they're not they're not ideologically aligned to the DPRK in any way. And the fact is they have an agenda to open up the DPRK, and they'd like to see the socialist system overthrown. I think that is very true, and I would draw attention. I'm not here to try and sell my books, but it seems my book, The Great Conspiracy Against People's Career, is very popular, and there's a section in it where I deal with the so-called DPRK engagers. Now, that's probably made me unpopular with one or two people, but I'm just saying like it is. My dad came from Yorkshire originally, and that is the place in Britain where people say what they like and they like what they say. Well, yeah, I mean, there's working class people who visited the DPRK, but they are very few in number, and they visited usually as parts of KFA delegations or Juche study delegations, or delegations from different communist parties. And I recommend very strongly that people visit the DPRK as part of a KFA delegation or a Juche study delegation, because you will not be seen as a tourist, but rather as a friend of the Korean people, and you'll have some leeway to negotiate over your itinerary, which you won't get with a tour company. Yeah, so good evening to you. I'll just say a bit more about KFA UK activities, as there's a bit of a lull in the questions and comments, or maybe the IT has just been slow again. That sometimes happens. Things take a few minutes to work through, but we are expanding KFA UK. I'm going to register 2 new members to KFA UK today. We are pushing ahead with the Shropshire branch. They're going to be going into action soon. And we also have a member giving out leaflets in Wales. And as I said earlier, we've got the meeting in Scotland, which should be great. I'm looking forward to trying a bit of haggis while I'm in Scotland. I am, of course, partly of Scottish origin with one Scottish grandparent, so I'm sort of looking forward to going up to Scotland. But of course, the most important thing will be to tell the people of Scotland about the reality of People's Korea, that what the mainstream media say about People's Korea is all lies, and to build a branch of KFA in Scotland. And we've got very good people in Scotland. Yeah, and of course in other parts of the UK. We're also developing the work of the British group for the study of the Juche idea, and we're planning some activities, and very soon it will be the 30th anniversary of the work on giving priority to ideological work is essential for accomplishing socialism. And in December, it's going to be the 70th anniversary of President Kim Il-sung's very famous work on establishing Juche in ideological work. Well, I mean, the question about genes is, well, I mean, basically providing foreign guests to the DPRK, foreign tourists, are dressed in a modest and decent way, or what they wear is not a problem. As to Koreans themselves, people don't want to wear jeans because they've got beautiful Korean clothes, smart Korean clothes that they can wear, and people in the DPRK reject Western culture. And in all my visits to the DPRK, which is 19 and all, and which began in 1992, I've never had people come up to me and ask if they could buy a pair of jeans. Not that I've actually worn jeans since I was about 16 or 17, but people used to tell me, and I don't know how true these stories were, maybe there was some truth in it, maybe it was made up, maybe it was exaggerated, but there were all these stories about people in the former socialist countries like Czechoslovakia and the GDR and so on, asking Western tourists to buy jeans and offering them ridiculous sums of money for jeans or any kind of Western clothes. Never ever saw that in the DPRK. No one ever asked me to buy my clothes, and I've never once seen a black market currency dealer in the DPRK. And I say that with absolute 100% conviction, because I've never ever seen one. But yes, I mean, DPRK does reject Western culture, but I don't think it's like a criminal offence to wear jeans. Right. Newly published material between 2020 and 2025. Yes. Well, I'm hoping the DPRK will start producing more hard copies of that. I think they've already published the excellent book Great Man, which looks like a very good book to read. I certainly found the PDF of it very good to read, but it'd be much better to see the actual hard copy. And I totally agree with Latin American. Well, all the questions. I was aware that Czechoslovakia was socialist at some point. Well, it was. In fact, it was all one country, and it was the Czechoslovak Socialist Republic, the CSSR, and it was a socialist country from 1948 to 1989. And indeed, studies actually showed it was actually one of the most egalitarian countries in Europe, where income differentials were very small. It was not without its problems. I mean, I travelled the length of Czechoslovakia in 1988, and some of the areas of Czechoslovakia looked in a poor state, and it did collapse due to a counter-revolution. It was very revisionist, as the other East European socialist countries were. And if you want more to read a bit more about Czechoslovakia, there's a book called Czechoslovakia, Believe It or Not, by Denver Walker, formerly of the New Communist Party, New Worker, and you can get that book free of charge on archive.org, I believe. Well, there is an official DPRK publishing company. There's Foreign Languages Publishing House and the Korea Publications Exchange Association. Anyone interested, please email me and I will do my best to put you in touch with them. Luke Wedgwood. I noticed that the article about cell phones was chastising the DPRK for having their own cell phone options and pushing the agendas of the tech countries tech companies that desire global markets. Well, you're absolutely right. They just don't like the fact that the DPRK can produce its own phones. You know, they would like the DPRK to buy their phones and be dependent on them. So they are annoyed that the DPRK can do this. And also you know, we're told all the time repeatedly that DPRK is backward, it's impoverished, that there's even no electricity there. They show the photoshopped NASA picture. It shows the DPRK in complete darkness because anyone can see that someone's gone. Looks like someone went over that picture with a black marker pen or something. It doesn't look real. You know, but you know, the DPRK is actually producing mobile phones. It's producing anything from a wristwatch to an intercontinental ballistic missile. So, you know, they've shot themselves in the foot by running this story about the phone. Yes, they are trying to an example of the DPRK for not using imperialist tech. Yeah, oh yes, Gregor. I also to your earlier comment, I hate jeans as well. I stopped wearing them when I was about 17. I think they, you know, they don't. To me, they don't look good. But also, I hate it when people say, "Oh, the people of North Korea are oppressed, stupid liberals." Well, yes, they are stupid liberals. It's a stupid liberal thing to say. You know, we got to smash liberal propaganda against the DPRK. Yeah, I'm sure that a lot of NSA spying goes on uh, through these phones, and you know, I've heard that both Google and Facebook are controlled by the CIA as well. Okay, well, we've been running for an hour. I'll just let things run for another 5 minutes just to give anybody a chance if they've got something they want to say, and if not, I will close it soon. I know there's sometimes a bit of a time lag with with this, so I'll just wait. Well, the Kim Il-sung Kim Jong-il International Foundation is for people who want to donate to the DPRK, but you know, it is really only if you really got big amounts of money to spare, which I think most of us have not got, unfortunately. But you can find the KKF website and donate through that. Yes, well, Gregor, I hope you'll be able to go to the DPRK one day, and we will certainly nominate hard-working KFA UK members to go to the DPRK. I mean, what we really should do is some fundraising to send people to the DPRK. I think it'd be very good if a delegation of working class and low income people could be sent to the DPRK. That would be really good. Okay, well, unless anybody else has got anything important they want to ask or say, I think we will call it a day. I think it's been a very good live stream. I think it's been one of the better ones. It's also great not to have the Ukrainian troll on the live stream tonight, since he was a bit of a nuisance the other few times. But I think it's been a very successful live stream. Please don't forget, Monday we've got our fourth reading session on the book Understanding Korea, Volume 9, Human Rights. And of course, we've got the weekend of action, including the picket on the 20th of June. So, I thank everybody for being here tonight. It's been great to speak to you all. I hope more people watch the live stream. So I wish everybody a very good evening and stay safe. Take care. Goodbye.